person here, and we'll name this person the perceiver, right? And the person is perceiving this orange box. So, there is my act of looking at the box, and as we know, colors emit wavelength. Depending on the frequency of the wavelength, it's going to determine the color of whatever the object is. So it's like this dynamic interaction that's going on between the individual, the perceiver, and the object, right? Here I am looking at this orange box. This orange box is in a sense projecting its color back to me, right? What Kant says is that there's two aspects that happens. In the construct of my mind, sort of the framework, and the way that I always explain this is with respect to sort of software and hardware, right? The hardware of a computer has the capabilities of doing anything that software, which is compatible with that capability, to do, right? So my hardware has the ability to adapt, right? But there's certain parameters that my hardware will do, right? I can't put toast into my DVD drive and expect it to toast, right? That's not a capability of that particular hardware, especially if we're talking about computers, right? Kant calls this hardware, this condition, the categories, C-A-T-A-G-O-R-I-E-S. These are the categories, right? And it's, technically speaking, it's the categories of your understanding. I'm not going to get into that. He has 12 categories. It doesn't really matter. So I have a category, and those categories allow me to interpret the data. And the technical term for it is sense data. So this is sense data. It allows me to interpret the sense data and make meaning of it, right? So that the categories are responsible for creating meaning. So I get meaning in the world because of my interpretation of sense data that's given to me. If you see a child on the side of the road and someone is, furiously beating the child with a stick, you don't need to experience the pain of that child to recognize that what's happening is wrong, because you're interpreting sort of the actions, the beating of the child. You're counting strokes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you know that they hurt. Well, quantity is one of the categories, right? This is one of the categories of one of the 12 categories of your understanding. I can make sense of the world based on my interaction with the object. Now, the first thing to recognize is that the rationalists, if we were to divide this, right? The rationalists argued this part, right? That everything is understood within the perceiver's mind. The empiricists argued this part, that it's only that which is verifiable that has any meaning. And Kant, he said, you guys are both wrong because it's a little bit of both, right? It's both the capabilities of my mind, which are the categories, and also the experience of the external world, right? So it's a little bit of, hold on a second. Dr. Campbell? Hello? So it's both the capabilities of my mind, but not only the capabilities of my mind, it's also experiencing, verifying this information in the world. It's a dialectic process. It's part external, part internal. So what Kant ends up realizing is, and this is the easiest way to say it, is now that we understand that the categories are sort of constructs of the mind, they're technically speaking, they're known as the conditions, C-O-N-D-I-T-I-O-N, the conditions for the possibility of understanding. Right? The categories are the conditions for the possibility of understanding. It is for example, I'm not going to go into whole space-time stuff, but it is impossible for you to understand anything independent to both space and time, right? If I'm thinking of something, as occupying some amount of space within a given amount of time. I mean, obviously the act of thinking is done within space at a particular moment, right? So that the conditions of the possibility of understanding, quantity being one of them, these categories help interpret, decipher, make sense of this sort of discombobulated, sporadic sense data. The sense data is given into, just like in a computer, it's like, imagine in a computer it's just 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0. Okay, it doesn't make any sense, right? 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. It's processed into the hardware, and the hardware presents a picture of a flower, right? That picture of a flower is only made sense by the hardware because the hardware has the conditions to process that data. Similarly, the way that I make sense of the world is because my mind is constructed in such a way that it is capable of processing wavelengths and light and frequency and sound to make sense, to give the world meaning, right? So it's a meaning-creating activity. That's sort of the rationalist end, right? This that is being projected is what's known as phenomenon, right? It's phenomena. What I then do is, after I make sense of this, I ascribe meaning to the world, and I notice that this thing is in fact red or orange or whatever it might be, right? But the fact that this thing is red is a condition of my mind. Obviously, if two people are looking at the same object and one person is colorblind, one person will see the object as red, one person will see the object as not red. One and the same object cannot both be red and not red at the same time. That's a contradiction, right? However, it actually is both red and not red at the same time. So since the contradiction doesn't lie in the object itself, it must lie within the constructs of the person's mind. So that one person's mind was constructed to sort of misrepresent red as green, right? So that we recognize that this experience of the world is part of the constructs of our mind. And funny enough that all of this, beginning with Hume, moving into Kant, moves into a more contemporary theory known as social constructionism, which says that the facts in the world are contingent on the constructs of our society, and sort of the facts are always in progress of evolving, right? I'm not going to get into that discussion now. I think this discussion on Hume's fork and how Kant applied it is sufficient. It should be simple now to see where all of this lies, right? Obviously, the synthetic portion, or the a priori portion, is here, right? The a priori portion are the categories of my understanding, and the synthetic portion is the stuff that I experience in the world. So I have my synthetic a priori. The synthetic is the interpretation of this projected sense data, right? The fact that it's thrown or given to me. And the a priori aspect of this are the categories which allow me, like a hard drive, to interpret the zeros and ones, the wavelengths, the frequencies, and transform that from zeros and ones into a flower, or to transform those sounds into a laugh, or to transform those wavelengths into red, right? All of that sense data is transformed and made sense of. And that's the distinction between the synthetic a priori. So initially, Hume said that there was only synthetic a posteriori. Hume would never say that there was a synthetic a priori. He would say there was only an analytic a priori. But Immanuel Kant went back, looked at Hume's fork, and recognized that he can give an account of the synthetic a priori, and that account is the account that I just explained. So hopefully that was really quick. Hopefully I didn't go through it too fast. If I did, just rewind it, watch it a couple times, you'll get the gist of it. But that was a very, very brief, quick introduction to Hume's fork and Immanuel Kant's account of the synthetic a priori. I hope this was informative, because that's what it's intended to do. I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell. Thanks for watching the video. Have a good day.